Hello, everyone, again. I'm Heidi Heitkamp, and I'm really excited about this conversation because there's absolutely nothing happening in politics today. Absolutely nothing that could affect the presidential election. It's just been a sleepy day, so we can just have a nerdy political sci conversation. Well, one thing about this guy, he always dominates the news cycle and he gets it in before the weekend. So everybody's going to be talking about it. Suck the oxygen out of the room once again. With me today are two great friends, Tim Miller. He is the writer at large for the Bulwark, and he is the author of the best-selling book, Why We Did It, a travelogue from the Republican Road to Hell. He was previously a political director for the Republican Voters Against Trump and communication director for the Jeb Bush 2016 presidential campaign. And he also is a promoter of North Dakota pinto beans. He gets a lot of, Barry Buxton. There you go. Those are our people. Yep. And with us also is Jonathan Codd. He's a partner at Capitol Counsel. He brings 20 years of communication policy and political experience to that firm. He has served as the communication director and senior advisor to both Senator Joe Manchin and Chris Coons. So you've got the range there. So my first question is, in light of the news over the evening that Trump was in fact going to be indicted, I guess they've issued the indictment. It's a matter of he shows up and is arraigned on Tuesday. How much money will he raise, and how much will his polling increase over the weekend? We'll start with you, Tim.
Heidi, thank you for having me. And do you have to be such a negative Nelly about this? Okay, can't we just enjoy it? I had a mimosa this morning. This is his second indictment. I'm going to appreciate that. Maybe my bias is showing here, but I think that there will be a short rally around the flag effect within the Republican primary, as we saw the last time he was indicted. I don't know if that is fait accompli, though. I think that a large reason for that, is that the Republican politicians and the conservative and MAGA media helped Donald Trump improve his own standing. And if you watch Fox over the past 24 hours, the preponderance of the arguments, there are a few counter voices, but the preponderance of the arguments is that this is unfair, that Mark Levin called it an insurrection, that there's a two-tiered system of justice, they're going after Trump. So if that's what voters are hearing, that these shadowy liberal elites are going after him, then it's natural that they're going to rally around the felon on this one. And so I think that's what we're seeing. It's what we saw last time. And I think that to change that, for the dynamics in the Republican primary to change, someone, most likely Ron DeSantis, is going to have to make a compelling argument to the types of Republican voters who still like Trump, are still sympathetic to him, but are open to seeing the reality that, this is not somebody they can win with. And I think that that's possible. But the longer this goes on without anyone making that case, the more it's going to end up seeming like Trump is an alpha dog in this primary, and that everyone else is just a sideshow.
Yeah, Jonathan, what's your take?
Look, I think just based on the responses we've seen from the other candidates, and I feel bad for them because now their entire weekend of events are going to be spent answering, would you pardon Trump? Do you think the DOJ is politicized, and nothing about them, which is only going to hurt them more. And to Tim's point, it's going to make Trump the alpha dog in the room because almost all of them are rushing to a microphone to say, I would pardon him. This is ridiculous. Essentially bending a knee to Donald Trump once again, which I don't think helps them break out of the pack. And at this point, it's Donald Trump at 50, Ron DeSantis at 20, and everybody except Tim Miller in the Republican Party at like 2%. Tim, you may want to get in. There seems to be a lane for you.
No, there is no lane for me, I promise. Thank you, though.
But that's what they have to figure out. I think he's right. It's going to, maybe he'll raise $15 or $20 million. He'll get a bump in the poll. But in 6 weeks, he might be indicted again. And I don't know if this same momentum keeps up. I mean, if he's going into the Iowa caucuses with 4 indictments and 4 court cases and wearing an ankle monitor just to get to Des Moines, Republican voters may say, look, we've had enough.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was just with Michael Steele this morning, and we were talking about this, and I said, look, the argument that I've been making is kind of like, okay, the Republican Party, he lost in 18, right? He lost the Congress in 18, leading to his impeachments, right? Because he didn't have the House. He lost the midterms, right? I mean, you think about, he just keeps losing. So now you're going to, so it's not like he hasn't been a loser, right? But Michael Steele's take on this is that there is a sizable majority of the Republican Party that doesn't care if they win or lose. They just want somebody who gives them permission to believe what they believe and who they think is leading the long game of reform. I mean, what's your take, Tim? Is it going? Is there any kind of thinking in the Republican Party right now about we can't win with this guy, or is it basically we can't win without the Trump base, therefore we need to do everything that we can to kind of I mean, they're almost this approach avoidance thing. We love Trump, but we need to be turning the page. Trump's a good guy, but I could carry the banner. I mean, it's such a mixed message at this point.
To Steele's point, I don't know that there's a sizable majority of the Republican Party that doesn't want to win at all, and I think that we saw, if you go back and look at the polls in November or December after the failed midterms, there were some real green shoots that there was enough Republican voters that were ready to move on. I mean, Trump still has whatever the number is, 30%, 40%, 25%, somewhere in there of people that are in a cult and are never going to leave him, right? But that's not enough to win a primary if someone else can get to 45% to get close to a majority. And those voters are there, people who like Trump but are practical. There's his MAGA base that is impractical, but then there are voters that like Trump but can be convinced. The problem is they have to be convinced. And no one's doing that right now. Trump is getting everyone that's coming to his defense. And some of them are out of fear, to your point, Heidi, that they might lose the MAGA base or that they might lose some support in their own district or their own state if they, get too far out over their skis on this. You see this with, Kevin Cramer every once in a while will say something and then, kind of back off, won't say anything anymore because you don't want the blowback. Some of it is that, and some of it is just these guys have like a shell of themselves after, being dominated by Trump for 7 years and kind of don't know where their North Star is. So yeah. I think that there is, if everybody jumped together, there are enough primary voters that probably could get someone like DeSantis, not somebody that I like, not like an Asa Hutchinson, not a Tim Miller, no, they can't win, but someone else could win if there was an actually concerted effort. But you keep seeing this, that anytime some momentum moves that direction, all of the influencers, get back around Trump out of their own self-interest or out of their own cowardice.
Well, I do have to say, I was genuinely surprised and pleased that John Thune endorsed Tim Scott.
Yeah.
So, I thought, well, but where are the rest of them?
Yeah.
Where are the rest of the Senate?
And it's kind of easy to endorse Tim Scott and then be quiet. It's one thing to do that. It's another thing to endorse Tim Scott and then try to help him win. And we haven't seen that yet.
Yeah. But showing up and saying this is my guy, that when everybody else is ducking. And I want to make this point. It is so dangerous for people to immediately jump on the bandwagon that this is a hoax, right? This indictment is built out of a hoax because they don't know. They don't know what the evidence is. They don't know if Meadows has flipped and told the grand jury information that is incredibly damaging. And if the CNN's to be believed, this audio tape is very concerning that you would, in fact, be bragging that you had the American plans to attack Iran. And you acknowledge it's classified and you didn't declassify it. So, this is dangerous territory. Jonathan, you've advised politicians people who are now jumping on the Trump bandwagon are doing it into a blind. They don't know what is going to come out in the next 2 weeks that would really build a better case with the American public that this is not a hoax, that this is not inappropriate exercise of authority. So how concerned would you be if you were representing one of those, Republicans who have jumped immediately to Trump's side?
I would tell them to take a breath, read the indictment, which is now going to be made public, see what comes out. But I think the fear of not being one of the first ones out and Trump knowing that you didn't stand behind him is more troubling to them than actually getting it right. Like, you may see in this indictment that he just openly admits it. You may see that Mark Meadows admits it. There may be video of him actually packing up the boxes. We have no idea. The My Pillow guy and him could have been in the White House the last day. He's saying, let's take this. It'll be great. Who knows? Jared Kushner could be there saying, Saudi Arabia's given us $2 billion. Let's make sure we take a couple of these things. So they should all be waiting a second, seeing what's in there, and then deciding, and also looking for leadership in other places. Look, I don't know that it helps him, but somebody like Tim Scott is a great alternative. If you're tired of Trump and you're tired of that type of politics, look to a guy who arguably everybody in the Senate likes. You may disagree with him, but he's a really nice guy, and I think he actually believes everything he says. That's not the case for a lot of politicians, but all these politicians, especially the ones on the Hill, shouldn't be so worried about Donald Trump backlashing at them and should be worried about getting it right and how they're going to be remembered in history. I mean, Jim Jordan already put out a statement saying they're going to investigate the investigators and we're going to hold up your funding. And I'm loving that the Republican Party has taken away from AOC and Bernie Sanders the mantle of defunding the police because, that's no good for us. And if they take it, great. But they should think through this and take a breath before react.
So Jonathan, when you were talking about the My Pillow guy, I thought the image that flashed in my head was stuffing the pillowcases with classified documents as they were packing up the linens.
It could be happening.
So let's turn the table and talk a little bit about why do you think that Robert Kennedy Jr. is polling at over 20% in the Democratic primary? I know everybody's that's not a big threat, and I don't think it's a big threat to Biden. But the fact that 20% of identified Democrats are now saying we really would turn to another alternative. How troubling would that be, Tim, if you were running the Biden campaign? And what do you think it tells us about what's going to happen in 2020?
Yeah, slightly troubled. I'd like to see a little bit, deeper into the data. At the Polk, we do these focus groups of MAGA folks, and I think we're going to try to do some Democratic primary ones to better understand the contours of that. My deep suspicion is that there's a very small percentage in the Democratic primary, and if you just look at Democratic primaries versus Republican primaries and how they turn out, it just tends that the craziest SOB in the race, to use Thomas Massey's phrase, is winning Republican primaries. That's not happening in Democratic primaries. But I think that there might be 5%, there might be 10% of the Democratic base that is a contrarian populist lefty that has that doesn't like the quote unquote neoliberal establishment, that might have contrarian views about vaccines and things and might be genuinely attracted to Kennedy. But I think that there's another batch of people that are saying Kennedy as just kind of a way to demonstrate their dissatisfaction with or their concerns about Biden's age. Right. And if you just look at the polls, Democrats are concerned that Joe Biden is too old, that they are worried about whether he's up for the job. And so voters, pollsters, people who are responding to the polls, a lot of times, if they're not able to, represent that dissatisfaction in a different way, they're like, oh, yeah, sure, I'll throw in with this Kennedy guy. They don't actually know a lot about his specific views. They just know that he's a Kennedy scion and that he's not 82. And so I think the age thing is really what this all comes back to, less that those people would vote for a Trump or a DeSantis in the general election. And And I think that Biden's going to have to demonstrate this. He got lucky in 2020 in some senses, that he didn't have to campaign as hard because of COVID. And he's not going to have that in his favor this time. And so I think that that's a real threat. It's something that I do think Democrats, that those of us who are aligned with Democrats, at least in this one instance, should be concerned about. But at this point, we kind of are where we are, and the Biden campaign is just going to have to do what they can to prop up Kamala, do a better job than they've been doing on that, and to assuage concerns about the age issue. And I think that some of that 20%, maybe not all of it, but some of that will go away as we get closer to reality.
So, Jonathan, I'm going to put you in charge of Biden's response to this polling. A lot of people talking about it in the kind of political world. How would you respond to it if you were representing or basically representing Biden and the Biden campaign?
I think they have to at some point make a switch from governing to campaigning. I think that happens way too early. The second the 2022 midterms ended, we started talking about 2024. Like, give it a breath. I think one of the problems he's having is he is focused on just actually governing and being the president and keeping his head down. And at some point, you have to turn around and say, okay, now we're campaigning, and it can't be in the White House every day. But I think the thing he has going for him that others won't is he can just go to ribbon cuttings and groundbreakings for all of the successful bills that he signed into law and send the cabinet out there, send the VP out there. There just has to be a more sustained drumbeat, right? Like, be out there with labor one day and Byros the next day, be in Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, the areas of the country where we're actually going to decide the election, making those campaign stops. And once he starts doing that, I think you're going to see some coalescing. But I do think there's always going to be 10 or 15% of the party that is concerned about how old he is, or that he's not lefty enough for them. And I think in the primary, they're going to show their disgust or their displeasure with it. And look, if it means they're voting for a guy who's anti-vax, then I guess that's how they're going to do it. But I'm not worried about like a convention fight and delegates being pressured to vote one way. And look, I think one thing I hope Democrats do, and this didn't happen in 2016, once we're done and there's a general election, come home. Like, this is not a time to like throw away your vote. This is not a time to be like, well, I like Biden, but I only like him 60% of the time. Like, get your ass to the ballot, vote for the guy who has helped you and made your life better, whether you like him or you think he's energetic enough. And also, if the issue is he more energetic, or is he up for the job? The guy's signing so many bills, he's out riding his motorcycle. Donald Trump is an obese man who cheats at golf. Like, the comparison there has always shocked me, how we think one guy's up for the job, but the other guy's not. And the last thing Donald Trump did was brag that he passed a test that they give to people to see if they have dementia. Yes, he was able to name 5 things off the top of his head. Oh my God. Like, that doesn't make me feel any better.
I agree with that. Can I just add one thing that's like relevant to one country here, though, that I think, because I do think the people that have age concerns are going to come back around, Democratic regulars. Like, it's just, I think they have legitimate concerns and they're expressing them in polls. There's a different group, though, and we saw this. You, Jonathan, I'm sure when you're working for Manchin, Heidi, you saw this. Like, in 2012 with Obama and 16 with Hillary, that in these rural states, I forget what it was. There was a primary where like a jailed guy nobody had ever heard of got like 20% or something in a Democratic primary in West
40
Virginia.
in West Virginia.
Yeah, right. Yeah, just because it was the way of West Virginia, kind of traditional old line Democrats to express that they don't like where the party's going on cultural stuff. And I do think Biden's better suited than Hillary or Obama was to speak to those voters when he's doing it. And, I was at the White House about a month ago, and that was my feedback, which was basically all this investment that's going into red America, rural America. He's got to sell that stuff harder and bring some of those people who are right now saying Kennedy, who are the ones that are at risk of voting for a Republican, which are mostly non-college whites, like speaking to just being more concerted in his effort to speak to them. I think that that's something that Biden could do better, the whole party could do better, really.
Well, back to your point, Tim, if we could do 10% better in rural counties in this country, this wouldn't be a close election.
Right.
Everybody's, well, what are suburban women going to do? Educated women. That is an important question because that's the difference between Trump winning in 16 and losing in 20. There's no doubt about it. And that issue has been exacerbated by the issue of Dobbs and the reversal of Roe v. Wade. But the old formula, you've got to hedge your bets. And what the One Country Project is about is, we just had a previous speaker. I don't know if you were able to listen. An author who talked about, you can't seed the ground. You've got to run candidates. You've got to have a dialogue. You've got to show up. Will you get over 30%? Maybe not, but at least you're getting 30%. And it's not 100% for the Republican candidate. And Democrats in those areas are depressed. They're like, why do I show up? No, my vote doesn't count. And so we've got to re-energize the bipartisan competition of rural America if we're going to win. I don't want to get into the third party stuff unless we have time at the end. I want to talk about Congress because, obviously conventional wisdom, and you guys follow this maybe more than I do, but I doubt it. Conventional wisdom would say Senate's a big risk. That's a big class for us, for the Democrats. But the House could flip back to the Democrat side. What's your take on the tea leaves right now, the horse race right now for Congress, and how important would it be to re-energize voters in rural America who are more moderate? Tim?
Sure. Yeah, sure. I can take that. Well, I think rural America, we have to talk also just about rural America like broadly, right? Which includes the more rural parts of states you don't think about it, like California and New York, right? And I do think that if you look at the maps right now, the Democrats do have some real chances. The Supreme Court decision yesterday was a big deal. I think that especially if that holds in Louisiana and North Carolina, you're looking at 5 seats right there, which is basically the majority conceivably that could flip, by getting rid of the racist gerrymanders in the South. But those are going to be competitive. Brandon Presley's running that Mississippi, a really competitive race right now, is a good example of somebody who's doing that. So that's one area where Democrats could pick up in the House. Then you have New York and California. Some of this is going to be the exurbs and the suburbs that you're talking about, but some of it is like upstate, in New York, where Democrats did very poorly. And I think Democrats did poorly last time, particularly in those states, because the Roe issue didn't feel as real. Right. To a lot of those voters, they're like, it's New York, right? They're not going to ban abortion here. Right. And so it's not Kansas. So the threat didn't feel as real. So Democrats got to do it.
And now the Supreme Court is considering banning medically assisted abortion.
Right.
So that hits everybody equally.
I do. Exactly. And so I think that's got to be a big play for Democrats to go into those more exurban and rural areas of blue states and make that case stronger. And then I think there are a couple examples of other places where Republicans are just too crazy. My man, Adam Frisch, and I'm from Colorado. Nobody believed in him in Beaufort's district. He nearly won that race. That covers most of rural Colorado. And Polis won the district narrowly. So it's a very winnable district. I think it's a little bit of a stretch, but you have the same thing in Montana. Some of the Wisconsin places where in Wisconsin where Republicans nominated lunatic insurrectionists in a couple of those districts, not Milwaukee and Madison. So I do think that there are, places where Democrats can win if they're putting in the resources and running candidates that are right for the district. And Frisch, I don't know if he was perfect for rural Colorado. He's a wealthy guy. He's not like you don't imagine him as a mountain man, but he ran as a middle of the road, practical, candidate. And I think that's really important, and to do even better is recruiting people that feel authentically of that district.
Well, and what's interesting to watch the recruitment of new veterans on the Democratic side, and they're coming because they've risked their life for freedom. They see the challenges in this country and saying, I'm going to step up and continue to serve. Jonathan, if you had to handicap right now the congressional race, what would you say?
Look, I think it's probably the way, I don't want to say I think the Democrats are going to lose the Senate because I think we have good candidates, but it's a tough map, right? Like there's no way to argue that John Tester is going in as the favorite in a state that's probably going to vote Republican in the presidential by 30%. But if anybody knows how to win there, it's him, and it's because we run candidates that understand the state. Look, John Tester will likely be the only actual Montanan in the Senate race, no matter who they pick. That's going to be helpful. Look, I'm from New York City. I voted Democrat my entire life, except in 2000, I voted for Rick Blasio because I didn't think Hillary Clinton knew New York, and just came in and, had some Sparrow pizza and put on a Yankee hat. As a Mets fan, that offended me. But I think, having candidates who understand their state and district is really helpful. Sherrod Brown is the perfect example. Like, there's no reason, like, I thought Tim Ryan ran the best race of anybody in 2022, and he lost by a lot. But he ran the best race he could. I think Sherrod Brown will improve on that. So I think we have a chance. But I think what you're going to see for the next 10 years is the House and Senate are probably going to be within 5 or 8 seats in the House and 2 seats in the Senate for the next 10 years. It's just going to go back and forth based on what the map is, because that's where I think the country is. I do think New York and California are great opportunities for us to pick up. Like George Santos is a seat we should, not assume, but like that should give us, at least 1 seat, and then start picking up seats elsewhere. But I really think, to the point that, one country is focused on, you need to have candidates talking about those issues. They shouldn't come in and take the DCCC or DSCC talking points. No offense to them, they do great work, but the generic national talking points don't work in these more rural communities. Like Joe Manchin can't go to Beckley, West Virginia, and take the DPCC talking points and say, this is what we're doing on healthcare. He has to go in and say, look, I know your struggles, and that's why I'm here helping you, and here's what I've done. And I think we have those candidates, but we got to keep recruiting. And look, Howard Dean had, I think, one thing really right. We need 50 state parties active every year, talking to voters every day of the week. We can't come in 6 months before an election and expect to convince people that we care and we understand them. They should be in there every day.
Yeah, I mean, we opened up this conference with Mitch Landrieu, talking about the level of investment. He's been to 30 states. He said he just recently went to an event in Nashville after the shooting, and then had time to go and visit some rural counties, has been at bridge openings. Pete Buttigieg was just up in Grand Forks at a particularly troubling railroad crossing, talking about how he's going to move traffic. But the one problem I will tell you, having watched now kind of national Democrats, they think, well, I said that. I already said that. I mean, they know that. I want to say repetition is the mother's milk of communication. And the problem with Democrats is they never learn how to say something over and over and over again until people are tired of hearing it. People say, I'm tired of hearing it. Your job's done. And so the Republicans will simply state a very simple message, make America great again, which he actually ripped off from Reagan, which no one ever talks about, right? And Reagan himself couldn't get elected in the MAGA group. He would be, think of what he did on immigration. Think of what he did to stabilize Social Security. I mean, you can argue his record on environment, but there's a number of accomplishments that he's had by compromising, and compromise is a bad word. And so the question becomes, if you don't solidify a broader geographic range of support, you will never see competitive legislative races again. And if there's one thing that we've learned in the last couple years here, whether it is legislatures saying we're going to take the election certification process away from the professionals, whether it is we are going to pass the most heinous kinds of anti-gay, transgender legislation we can, we're going to ban books, we're going to, go on and on and on. The rest of my state goes, why are you talking about this? Well, they're talking about it because that's why they ran for election, and they ran unopposed. And so, so what do we do to convince national political people, and especially the donor class, that you can't just give to Joe Biden? You've got to be stabilized kind of this situation and the democracy going forward by investing in a robust competition on ideas and politics in every state. Jonathan, you just said, oh, this is what we need to do. Well, try and raise money for that.
Look, I tried to raise money for moderates. It doesn't work. It's not sexy. There's a reason there's no, moderate media empire. We don't do well online. Moderate Democrats.
Doing all right.
Moderate Democrats.
We're not an empire, though.
Moderate Democrats, we struggle.
He's trying to be an empire.
Yeah, you're getting there. I just think, it's saying we want to get basic things done and keep the trains running doesn't have the same appeal in this new media environment where it's just who shouts the loudest. And I think you have, at this point, you have members who come here who don't actually try to get stuff done. They just try to raise their profile, keep their Twitter numbers up, and raise some money. So
yeah, I have a couple of thoughts on this. I think there's some things you can do. One is having good candidates matter. Colin Allred in Texas is going to raise a bunch of money. I think that's a tough race, but it's good that he's in there. I think he's a really
can I just say this? This whole idea of macho men, right? And I put those two guys on a stand and tell me who's more alpha male.
Yeah, come on. Colin scares me. I look at some of his old highlights. But so that's good. But I think that there needs to be that needs to be replicated. And I think that, there are two ways to kind of go at this culture issue, since that's what motivates everybody, right? That's what motivates the donor class, the culture stuff. And the Democrats are on the losing side of the culture war in lots of America, and they're in the winning side in the suburbs, and why they've been winning in Atlanta and Phoenix, et cetera. So how do you win these things? Well, what I think is that the Republicans have gone so extreme on some of these. If you look at what happened in Tennessee, if you look at this constitutional carry, 18-year-olds being able to buy AR-15s without a training or background check, that's insane. I mean, that's even Republicans don't agree with that. I interviewed that Gloria Johnson in Tennessee about this recently, and I think that having candidates like her, having candidates who are, being able to recruit at the lower level, and say, hey, we need people in North Dakota and Montana. And hey, look, I just went to Louisiana. We just had one Republican who did the right thing that saved just a really heinous anti-trans bill, but because he was a doctor and he felt like it was like, I don't want these guys, my colleagues shouldn't be the doctor should be the doctor, right? So I think trying to motivate people that way and say, hey, this isn't going to create the huge victories, but by getting a few more Democrats, conservative Democrats, moderate Democrats in these really red areas, we can stop a lot of really bad, extreme stuff from happening, and that's been lost because the Blue Dog Democrats have, gotten, kind of wiped out. But I think that there can be a new wave of that if there's an effort put in, and I that should be motivating to donors, right? I don't know, maybe it's not quite as sexy as winning the presidency, but saying, hey, getting 3 more state senators in Tennessee and Louisiana and Montana or whatever is going to prevent 18-year-olds who are raped from not being able to get an abortion, prevent bills that target gay families, right? Like that's real. And so anyway, that'd be my take.
Yeah.
I mean, we lost one vote in North Carolina. One vote switched, but to your point, it's not sexy, and it's hard to raise a ton of money saying we need to get 5 more state senators. Like, that's just, I don't know why the appeal's never been there for all the people who are angry about, Trump trying to steal the election. Go fund secretaries of state. It's not a sexy thing to do, but if you have a really good, competent secretary of state in there, you can protect some of the elections.
Well, guess what? The Koch brothers and a lot of the funders on the Republican side decided they were going to play the long game a long time ago.
Yeah, sure.
And I think it's like anything else. Funders are impatient, they want results now, and you want to say this is a 10-year deal coming back from where we've been. And Tim, I think it's interesting because now that the Republicans have really driven kind of this very extreme agenda on education, banning books, funding, taking money away from public education and handing it to private institutions, some of which don't even want to be judged on accreditation. Taking anti-trans bills, choice being so extreme, like protection at conception. The culture wars have kind of shifted, and for some rural voters, that's true too. I mean, I think that rural voters tend to be, more right to life. I'm not saying that, but if you look at bringing back the percentages that I'm talking about, people mishear me when they say, well, I think we need to do better in rural areas. They think I'm saying we need to win. I'm not saying we need to win. I'm saying that in order to build a robust democracy, you need two-party system. And if you don't have two parties having a dialogue about issues, your democracy is in jeopardy. And so, but it is, let me tell you, people want moderate candidates, but they don't want to fund moderate candidates. I used to say, if you wanted money, do something that ignited or angered the base, right? So and so said, this today, and money falls from the sky. But if I said, I've got a plan to fix Social Security for 75 years, where's my money? It's not coming. It's not who gives money. And so the moderate voter needs to also be a moderate donor. Now, we had a conversation earlier today about ranked choice voting and Final Four voting to bring back moderates into the fold. And you saw Lisa Murkowski being able to survive, a couple votes. She didn't vote for Kavanaugh. She voted to impeach Trump. So you look at her votes that clearly angered cultural voters, clearly angered MAGA voters, but yet she survived in Alaska because of the system. So how important is it to look at electoral reforms, redistricting reforms in conjunction with bringing back a more robust two-party system?
Yeah, I like top two. Also, it's a little more simple, and Louisiana has a Democratic governor right now because of it, right? Just having that's just like the jungle primary runoff. People understand ranked choice voting is a little complicated. I mean, it worked out in Alaska, and so I'm giving it a second look. But I was always a little more skeptical of it because it's like, man, we need more people to vote as it is, and when you make it so complicated, sometimes that could have a backlash, when it comes to the election hysteria stuff. But I like the jungle primary and runoff system. I'm open to ranked choice. I think that obviously what is happening right now in the South with these legal challenges is very important. We have Alabama, Louisiana, North Carolina that are foul of Voting Rights Act. I think it's insane that in Tennessee
and Mississippi is 40% African American.
Yeah, so they should have two.
One vote.
Yeah, one vote. That should be two. Tennessee, Nashville doesn't have a rep. Nashville is drawn so that it's like a pizza pie, right? So it's there's 4 districts that go out in a pizza, and so Nashville doesn't have a rep, which is crazy, right? So I think that some of that stuff matters. To me, just my bias is I think more candidates that match those kind of states are better. And so I echo everything you said about trying to get donor money and support for candidates that are a little heterodox, that are willing to go there, because the Republicans have gone so extreme in some of these places. It's not an accident that Brandon Presley has a chance to win in Mississippi, and that you could win some of these places. Rural voters, a lot of these MAGA voters were secular. They're not evangelical. They're secular, and they are not here for 5-week abortion bans or teenagers getting raped. Now they are there for reasonable restrictions. So anyway, I think the candidate recruitment's the most important, but winning these legal fights, what Mark Elias is doing, is important, and the election reform stuff, TBD.
Jonathan, you want to weigh in?
I agree. I don't understand the ranked choice voting as well as I should. To me, it sounds a lot like an Iowa caucus, which I've never really thought was the best way, even though I love going to Iowa and gaining 30 pounds every 4 years. But I think having a simpler system that encourages more people to get in, I think the problem we have is, we vote at like a 60% rate in the country. That's embarrassingly low, given the stakes and how, politicians impact people's lives. So anything we can do to get more people to run and more people to vote, I would be supportive of at least trying out. Look, I remember every Democrat thought Susan Collins was toast in Maine because of ranked choice voting. And turned out Susan Collins kicked our ass, and it's because she knew the state, she knew the voters, and she was speaking to them for years, and we just didn't have that. So I think getting the right candidate, getting a candidate that fits their state, and then making sure we're doing everything we can to get more people to vote, not less. I think anytime a party is working to have less people vote, that should tell you that maybe their message isn't resonating with a lot of the voters.
Yeah, you saw what happened when, if you analyze the midterms, for the first time in a long time, youth voting mattered. Yep. And the immediate reaction was, well, we can't have young people voting. Not maybe we should rethink our position on climate, on guns, on immigration, dreamers. Maybe we should rethink these positions. That wasn't the reaction. The reaction was maybe we shouldn't let those people vote. Maybe that was a mistake.
And maybe we should get single women married because single women started voting Democratic and married women voted Republican. Doesn't seem like the right approach. Maybe you should just talk to those voters about what they care about.
Okay. We just have a few minutes left. I'm going to let you guys tell me who's going to be the Republican nominee for president. Tim?
I was probably the most bullish never Trumper on DeSantis out of all my little peers in the pundit class, and he hasn't demonstrated it. He's had a good week. I think the reason why I'm bullish is that I think he has a good elevator pitch, which is I won, Trump lost. I'm going to give you the MAGA stuff you like and make the liberals cry and the media cry just as much as him, but I can actually win. The problem is he just doesn't. He's weird. He's weird, and it's not really landing for him. And so I just think that it's really hard right now to bet against Trump unless something changes in the dynamic between now and early next year.
Let me tell you, the reason why it doesn't land with DeSantis is because it's inauthentic.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, with Trump always, when he would do this stuff, he had a little twinkle in his eye, like, I'm kidding. Yeah, I'm just having fun. Right. And DeSantis doesn't get the nuance of this. He's like fire breathing without the wink.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And Cruz ran into the same problem, right? Yeah. I mean, and I always thought DeSantis was going to be better at it than Cruz, because how could you be any worse than Ted Cruz on performance capability? But it turns out that he has a lot of similarities there, and Cruz ended up getting high 30% in the primary, but that Trump had more. So I think that unless the legal stuff just becomes so overwhelming that it's impossible to imagine Trump winning, he's in pretty good shape.
So what do you think, Jonathan?
I agree. I can't see how 50, and he doesn't need to lose 50%, but how 30% of these voters who are still with him and keeping him at 50, 60% in the primary leave him and all go to DeSantis. Because it's not that DeSantis needs to get 5%. He needs to get 30% and have them all come to him. And I think Tim is right. He's a weird guy, and he's clearly not comfortable with people. Like, there are politicians who are great in office, and they're horrible on the stump. And one of DeSantis's problems is in Iowa, New Hampshire, a little less in South Carolina, you have to actually meet these voters one-on-one, be in a small room with them. And he's really weird and awkward in that. And he's falling into the Rudy Giuliani trap of, woke is a noun, a verb, and an adjective. And at some point, if you're a voter in New Hampshire, I don't think you know what CRT, DEI, ESG, and woke means, and you don't care, right? Like, you're wondering about what funding he's going to bring to your kid's school. So at a certain point, he's going to have to switch gears and talk to them in that way. And I don't think he can.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be Trump, and I'm happy about that.
Yeah, I'm gonna end this on a happy note. One of the issues in North Dakota has been this kind of try and take over the school board, right? So in Fargo and Grand Forks, you had book banners who ran, and they came together as kind of a team and said, we are going to change the way the schools run in these two cities. They lost not by a little, but by a lot. And so I think that we tend to think about these folks driving a narrative, whether it's ESGs or D. I mean, what does it say about me that I know what all those acronyms stand for? But it is, we have oversimplified the American voter. And that's to our peril. And one of the reasons why we think this is so important, the work that we do at One Country, is because there is two sides of the story, and there is a legitimate debate, and there is a path forward for rural America to once again revitalize and not be taken for granted. And so, you guys, it's been fun. And so I won't hold you to it, but if you were looking for my vote, I think it's Donald Trump. I don't see a path forward right now for anyone other than Donald Trump.
Well, that's bad news, but I agree with you, Heidi. I think what you guys are doing is good, and happy to be helpful. Anything, we can do, because I think that there's kind of a big overlap between what Never Trump voters are looking for and what rural folks are looking for. And I think that there's more of an appetite there than people realize. So thank you for your
I do
work.
too. And it's about what's good for our country, what's good for rural America, and it's about bringing back common sense, good, fair, balanced dialogue to come to conclusions to govern the country. And that's really what we're about. Okay, thanks, you guys.
Is this a high camp 2024, 2026?
No, it is not.
We could use you back in the Senate.
No. I mean, just to close out with one factoid. When I ran in 2012, I beat Obama's percentage. Obama lost North Dakota by 20, and I won by 3,000 votes. When I ran again, the pollster said, look, only 4% of the people who will vote for a Republican will cross over and vote for you. It was 20 before. So that tells you that and it's time for a different voice. It's time for a new voice in politics. And I'm not that old, but I've been around a long time, and I think we can promote younger candidates and new voices. And I think that's what's going to rejuvenate our political dialogue is younger people. So that's my pitch. We will talk to you later. It's good to see you. Say hello to your beautiful daughter your wonderful husband. And Jonathan, try and convince your old boss not to do what he might do.
Seconded.
Talk to you later.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.